Welcome to this 365 Freedom Strategy session. Today we're breaking down the mechanics of story momentum and why your brand's biggest bottleneck is your need to be extraordinary.
Right, and it really is a massive bottleneck. We are completely tearing down this pervasive myth today. The myth that connection with your audience requires these grand, highly polished narratives.
Yeah, exactly. The architecture we are analyzing today, specifically looking at the framework from week 09, season 3, episode 07, it proves something pretty counterintuitive.
It does.
It proves that waiting for some kind of useful lesson actively sabotages your resonance.
It's just a huge point of failure for most brands. So today we're going to examine how shifting your internal operating system from, performing to actually paying attention creates unstoppable momentum.
Because it's a fundamental pivot, right? Like in how you view your own daily experience.
Absolutely. For most founders and creators, there is this incredibly heavy, strenuous effort attached to communication. They scan their lives, basically constantly filtering their days.
Desperately looking for something worth saying.
Yes, exactly. And they hesitate the very second a moment seems too small or, too ordinary.
You see it every single time someone sits down to write an update or record a video. There is this actual physical tension.
Oh, you can feel it.
We have literally trained ourselves to believe that we only get permission to speak when we can make the narrative sound clean and resolved and inherently valuable.
And that instinct to manufacture value is exactly what kills the connection. Founders try to make a story useful before they even allow it to be real.
Right.
You sit down at the keyboard and the internal editing process is just already running at full speed before you have even recalled the actual event.
You're hunting for a triumphant ending.
Yeah, you want a profound, universally applicable business lesson that you can somehow extract from your morning coffee.
Which is exhausting.
It is. And by forcing a lived experience through this heavy filter of profound utility, you actually strip away the very humanity that an audience connects with. You end up broadcasting a sanitized corporate fable.
Okay, well, let's unpack this right out of the gate because I really want to challenge that premise strategically.
Sure, go for it.
If we look at the reality of the market, doesn't an audience actually expect a takeaway? I mean, we are constantly told that attention is the most scarce resource on the planet right now.
Right, the attention economy.
Exactly. So if founders do not offer a polished lesson, aren't they just wasting the listener's time? Like if I share a random, unpolished fragment of my day with zero moral attached to it, why would anyone care?
And see, that assumption right there is the exact trap. It forces us to entirely redefine what value actually means in the modern landscape.
Okay, how so?
Well, we've been conditioned to believe that value only comes in the form of action items, right? Or life hacks, or, 10-step frameworks to optimize your morning routine.
Yeah, the classic listicle approach.
Exactly. But actual connection doesn't form from those big manufactured structures. It forms from the smaller, unpolished truths that people almost always dismiss.
The moments that feel almost too normal to share.
Precisely. Because when you force a big message onto a small moment, it feels incredibly heavy.
The storytelling just becomes performative.
It feels like a lecture. The audience senses the manufacturing process happening in real time. They feel the friction of you trying to manipulate a completely mundane Tuesday afternoon into a profound TED Talk.
Oh, wow, yeah. That is so true.
The value in a raw, unpolished story is not a lesson. The value is the relief of shared experience. It's the audience suddenly realizing they aren't alone in the quiet, messy, totally unresolved parts of their lives.
You can physically feel that friction when you read typical brand content. Like you can read a post and literally sense the author straining to tie a neat little bow on it at the end.
Sweating over the keyboard to make it sound smart.
Right. And it feels exhausting to read, which absolutely guarantees it was exhausting to write.
100%.
And that exhaustion really brings us to the primary case study we're evaluating today, which perfectly isolates this whole dynamic.
The Notes app story.
Yes. Consider the scenario of a founder simply scrolling through a Notes app filled with half-finished thoughts. These are just fragments, abandoned sentences.
Stuff they jotted down and forgot about.
Right. They were left there because the author deemed them too small to matter.
I mean, we all have that graveyard of thoughts in our phones, don't we?
Definitely.
A sentence about a weird conversation or just a stray observation about feeling tired in the middle of the day. But let's look at the specific note isolated in our framework today.
Yeah, read that one out.
The author wrote, and I'm quoting here, "I sat in my car for a minute after the grocery store because I didn't want to go back into my own life yet."
I want you to just pause for a second and think about the mechanics of that sentence. I sat in my car for a minute after the grocery store because I didn't want to go back into my own life yet.
It's powerful.
Let's analyze the components. It isn't impressive. It is definitely not dramatic.
No, not at all.
It completely lacks a triumphant ending. And it doesn't offer a single solution. It is barely even a complete thought.
Honestly, if you take that exact sentence to a traditional marketing agency, they will tell you to delete it immediately.
Well, they would panic.
They would say it's the exact opposite of what conventional authority building dictates. Because there is no flex. There's no demonstration of competence or leadership.
But look at the execution of honesty when the author decided to post it anyway. Exactly as it happened.
Yeah, the sensory details.
Right. They described the harsh fluorescent lights of the grocery store, the way their hands felt stiff, wrapped around the steering wheel. That quiet dread they couldn't quite explain.
And that strange, insulated comfort of just sitting in a parked car with nowhere to be for 60 seconds.
And they posted it with a really simple, completely unpretentious line. They just said, I think this is what overwhelm looks like when it gets quiet.
That's it.
That is it. No list of 5 ways to beat overwhelm. No pitch for a stress management course. Just an observation.
It's so refreshing.
It really is like finding a slightly blurry photo on your camera roll that perfectly captures the exact mood of a late night out versus posting a heavily retouched, perfectly lit studio headshot.
Oh, I love that analogy.
The headshot is flawless, sure, but the blurry photo is the one that actually makes you feel something. The headshot shows people what you look like. The blurry photo shows people what it feels like to be in the room with you.
The blurry photo analogy is exactly it, because what makes a photo blurry? Movement. Life happening in real time.
Right.
The headshot is perfectly in focus because the subject is holding their breath. They are terrified of making a mistake. They're completely static.
So true.
When you write those highly polished, lesson-driven posts, the audience can actually feel you holding your breath. You're rigid. But the parked car story is blurry. It's moving.
And what's totally fascinating is the actual environment of that specific story. The parked car.
The liminal space?
Exactly. It's a liminal space.
Yeah.
You aren't in the public performance of the grocery store anymore, but you haven't yet taken on the responsibilities waiting for you inside your house.
You're suspended.
Suspended, yes.
Yeah.
We all experience that suspension, but society kind of tells us we should feel guilty for it.
Because we're supposed to be productive every single second.
Right. So when someone finally names that 60-second pause, it feels genuinely revolutionary.
So let's break down the actual audience reaction to that blurry photo of a story.
Yeah.
Because the metrics tell a very compelling strategic narrative.
They really do.
There were no fireworks. There was no massive viral explosion that crashed the servers or anything like that.
No millions of views.
Exactly. But the result was far more strategically valuable. The response consisted of private, deeply resonant messages.
Yeah, the DMs.
Right. People were responding in direct messages saying things like, I've done that too, or I thought I was the only one, and thank you for putting words to it.
Thank you for putting words to it. That really has to be the ultimate metric of resonance.
It is the holy grail.
When an audience member says that to you, you haven't just shared information. You have provided emotional vocabulary. You've given them a tool to understand their own internal state.
Which is incredibly powerful.
It builds a depth of loyalty that a generic listicle about productivity hacks can never, ever touch.
It creates an anchor. But the critical observation from this case study is not even about the audience's response, actually.
Right, it's about the author.
Yes. The most profound shift was what happened internally for the author. Sharing that small, supposedly insignificant story made the next story significantly easier to tell.
And this is the core engine of the momentum concept we're talking about today.
Yes, the mechanics of story momentum.
It didn't make the next story easier because the algorithm rewarded them with high engagement metrics. It made it easier because it proved a hypothesis.
A very personal hypothesis.
Right. It proved that your normal, unpolished life does not need to be extraordinary to be deeply meaningful to someone else.
We so often look at momentum in marketing as this snowball effect of algorithms. Like, you post, you get likes, the platform pushes you to more people, so you feel motivated to post more.
The dopamine loop.
Exactly. But that is external momentum, and it is incredibly fragile because you do not control the platform.
Not at all.
The framework we are analyzing today is detailing internal psychological momentum. It's the sudden, complete removal of the massive friction caused by imposter syndrome.
Oh, well, yeah.
When you realize that just sitting in a parked car is enough to hold someone's attention and make them feel seen, that crushing pressure to perform just vanishes.
It evaporates.
You realize you don't have to earn the right to speak by enduring some grand trial or achieving a massive financial exit.
Which means momentum doesn't actually require volume or frequency. It requires trust.
And we really have to be very precise about what kind of trust we're talking about here.
Right. Clarify that for us.
We aren't just talking about the audience's trust in your brand. We are talking about your trust that your own lived experience holds intrinsic value.
Which so many people lack.
Because by constantly waiting for useful lessons, founders are actively invalidating their own daily experiences.
They're throwing their own lives away.
Yes, they're effectively telling themselves, my normal life is boring. My thoughts are worthless unless I can extract a business principle from them to justify my existence online.
That is so bleak when you say it out loud.
It is bleak. Building story momentum means trusting that honesty alone can hold attention. You're trusting that simply being human is a sufficient strategy.
But, knowing that the blurry photo works better than the headshot creates a completely new problem.
Okay, what's that?
How do you actually get yourself to post the blurry photo when your entire professional instinct is screaming at you to put up the polished headshot?
The fear of judgment is real.
It really is. We're talking about a massive transition here. Storytelling stops being a performance for the audience and becomes a relationship with your own life. So from a strategic standpoint, how does that shift actually look in practice?
Well, the architecture we're analyzing defines this as the technical difference between managing a narrative and sharpening awareness.
Those sound very different.
They're completely different paradigms. Managing a narrative is a defensive posture. It is what 99% of brands do. You're constantly trying to control how you are perceived by the market.
Right, PR mode.
Exactly. You project a polished image, you mitigate risk, you hide the messy parts, you construct this very specific facade. And maintaining that facade requires immense, exhausting energy.
Because it's fake.
Right. Sharpening awareness, on the other hand, is an offensive strategy. You aren't trying to invent stories or control perceptions at all.
Just paying attention.
You are simply training yourself to notice the emotional echoes and patterns that are already occurring in your day.
Let's look at the cascade of awareness that happened to the author after that parked car breakthrough, because this is where it gets really actionable.
Yeah, the floodgates open.
Once they opened that door, they started noticing everything. They noticed a moment standing in line at the pharmacy, feeling themselves physically bracing for bad news, even though absolutely nothing was happening.
Anticipatory anxiety.
Yes.
It is a completely universal human experience, yet it is almost never articulated in professional spaces.
Right, because it feels like a weakness. Then they noticed the way they paused, just for a second, before opening a text message from a loved one.
Not because they didn't love the person.
Exactly, but out of this sudden, quiet fear that the message would demand something of them when their tank was already totally empty.
Demand avoidance.
Yeah.
The sheer exhaustion of constant digital availability. Again, universally felt, but rarely named.
And finally, they noticed the physical relief of folding warm laundry and suddenly realizing their shoulders had dropped an inch without them consciously telling them to relax.
Somatic release. So notice the pattern here.
Yes, a pattern.
None of these are events. They aren't plot points in a hero's journey. They are micro-reactions to ordinary life.
Just tiny flashes of feeling.
Right. And this raises an essential question. Why do these specific micro-moments work as compelling brand stories?
Because they're relatable.
They work because stories train awareness. When you reflect on one moment, you become highly sensitive to the next. Momentum isn't about creativity at all.
That's a huge relief for a lot of people.
It really is. You do not need to be a creative genius to have momentum. Momentum is purely a function of attention. It's the act of being present enough to realize that your shoulders just dropped while holding a warm towel, and having the strategic confidence to recognize that feeling as a valid, shareable human experience.
Wait, let me push back on this because I can hear the skepticism from founders listening right now.
Go ahead.
Isn't there a severe danger here of just becoming completely self-indulgent? Like, if I start posting every single time my shoulders drop while folding laundry or every time I sigh in my car, aren't I just oversharing?
The oversharing trap.
Right. At what point does this stop being a brand strategy and start being a public diary entry? Where is the actual line between sharpening awareness and treating your audience like a therapist?
That is probably the most important distinction we can make today. The line between strategy and self-indulgence comes down entirely to processing versus bleeding.
Processing versus pleading. Tell me more about that.
If you are bleeding all over your audience, meaning you are in the middle of an unresolved crisis, and you are dumping raw, chaotic emotion onto them, expecting them to fix it or comfort you, that is a diary entry.
And that pushes people away.
It drains the audience. But what we are talking about here is observation. You are naming a universal state.
Okay, I see.
When you say, I realized I was bracing for bad news in the pharmacy line, you aren't asking the audience to fix your anxiety. You're holding up a mirror.
You're just stating a fact about the human condition.
Yes. You're saying, this is what it feels like to be a human operating at a high frequency today. Do you feel this too? The value isn't in them comforting you. The value is in them recognizing themselves in your observation.
That makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
It is the difference between saying, hey, help me carry this weight, and saying, I noticed this weight, and I bet you are carrying it too.
Exactly.
And that brings to mind the data from the woman we analyzed in the case studies earlier. The one who truly believed she had absolutely nothing to say beyond surface-level business updates.
Oh, her story is perfect for this.
She was totally convinced her life was far too boring and routine for storytelling.
She was entirely trapped by her own perceived ordinariness. She looked at her daily routine, emails, meetings, school drop-offs, and saw zero strategic value.
Which is how most people look at their lives.
But when she finally applied this framework and shared a brief story about a quiet moment of self-doubt, not some major earth-shattering crisis, just a small, nagging question about her own capability on a Tuesday morning, the internal shift was immediate.
And she described the feeling afterward as opening a window in a closed room.
Opening a window in a closed room.
The imagery there is so striking. When you ruthlessly curate your life to only show the polished, useful, highly optimized parts, you are building the walls of that closed room yourself.
And it gets incredibly stuffy in there.
You run out of air. You completely run out of material.
Her life suddenly felt more spacious because she began to see meaning where she previously only saw routine. The very moment you validate your own mundane experiences by sharing them honestly, the world opens up.
The bottleneck clears.
You're no longer frantically scanning your life for the 1% of moments that fit the traditional success narrative. You suddenly have 100% of your life available as raw material.
That's amazing.
That is the mathematical certainty of how momentum forms. You simply have infinitely more resources at your disposal because you finally stopped throwing away the ordinary ones.
So let's transition into the actual mechanics of implementation, because this really requires a behavioral shift.
A big one.
If you're listening to this and your storytelling feels painfully inconsistent right now, the natural instinct is to try and fix it with brute force.
Oh, yeah. People buy planners.
Right. You download a massive content calendar, you set strict disciplinary rules for yourself, you mandate daily posting quotas.
Which never works.
But the architecture we're looking at explicitly warns that this is the absolute worst approach you can possibly take.
It is a guaranteed path to burnout. The solution to inconsistency is not discipline. The solution is attention.
Say more about that.
If you try to fix your storytelling inconsistency by applying rigid discipline, you're just going to manufacture more of those forced, heavy, useful lessons.
Yeah, just get better at producing sanitized corporate fables faster.
Exactly. You aren't fixing the root problem at all. You have to change the mechanism of discovery itself.
And the framework provides a very precise diagnostic for this. Instead of staring at a blank screen asking, what profound thing can I teach today, you ask yourself a completely different set of questions.
Right. You shift the focus.
You ask, what stayed with you today? What felt a little heavier than you expected it to? What sparked a real emotion, even if it only lasted for a single second?
You are training your brain to look for what lingered. Maybe it was a passing sentence a colleague said to you that you kept unconsciously replaying in your head on the drive home.
Or a physical feeling.
Yes, maybe it's a physical feeling that stayed lodged in your body, like noticing the tension in your jaw 20 minutes after a seemingly normal low-stakes Zoom meeting.
A moment you just couldn't quite shake off.
These are your indicators. You do not need to know why they lingered in the moment. The strategic move is simply to capture the fact that they did linger.
Let's make this highly actionable for everyone listening. The framework gives a specific directive to basically bypass the bottleneck.
The 3 moments exercise.
Exactly. You write down 3, quote-unquote, too small to matter moments from your week, just fragment sentences. And then you physically circle the one that still has a pulse.
The one that still carries some residual emotion when you look at it.
Right. Why is that physical act so important?
The physical act of circling that moment is crucial. It acts as a circuit breaker for the logical, hyper-optimizing part of your brain that is desperately trying to find the business ROI in the story.
Ah, so you're short-circuiting the filter.
You are bypassing the logic and tapping directly into the resonance. You are isolating the raw material of human connection.
And then what?
Once you've circled it, you follow the final synthesis of the framework. You treat that moment as an invitation, not a performance. You tell the story simply. You don't make it perfect, you just make it honest.
So no moral of the story at the end.
No. You do not tack on a triumphant ending. You don't awkwardly pivot to explain how this somehow proves your unique value proposition. You just state exactly what happened and exactly how it felt.
You just let the fluorescent lights and the stiff hands on the steering wheel do the heavy lifting for you.
That's it. That is exactly how unshakable momentum begins. Not with a megaphone or a viral stunt, but with the quiet, undeniable truth that makes the listener exhale.
That is so incredibly powerful. I really want to leave you with a final reflection to mull over as we close out this session today.
It's a great question to ask yourself.
Think about a moment today that you actively rushed past or intentionally ignored. A moment you immediately deemed unprofessional or off-brand or simply too small to matter. What if that discarded, unpolished fragment is the exact emotional anchor your audience is starving for right now? What are you costing your brand by refusing to be real? If you're ready to build story momentum and let honesty hold attention, visit 365 Freedom online to join the community. This has been a 365 Freedom Strategy session.